Good day. Hope your day is going well. It's time once again for another devotional. And so we're going to start that as I've been doing last little while, just to report on the weather here in Nova Scotia, in my part of Nova Scotia, in Halifax area. It's a warm day. I think we're going to have a little bit of thunder later or something, but it's a pretty nice day out there. Pretty warm. Summery day. I hope that your day is going well and that you've got maybe a sunny day wherever you are. We're going to continue on our study here. We've been looking at Proverbs chapter 1, and we're just going verse by verse. For those that maybe you're just catching on, this is the first video or whatever. The whole point of this devotional series is to move through the book of Proverbs one verse at a time and look at that verse and just draw some of the value out of that verse. And so that's what we're doing. And we've just been doing this for a few days, but we're at verse 12 of chapter 1. And most of the Proverbs, each verse is kind of a standalone that you can deal with. But there are sections of Proverbs where you kind of got to know the sentences around it in order to really get the most out of it. And so I'm going to read verses 11 to 14 because they're all kind of a single sentence. And then we're just going to focus on verse 12 today, just like we focused on verse 11 yesterday. So here's what it says. And then, of course, these devotionals are just meant to help you in your own study and your own investigation into the wisdom of the book of Proverbs in the Bible. So Proverbs chapter 1, verse 11 to 14, and I'll emphasize verse 12. It says, "If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, even whole as those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil. Throw your lot in with us. We shall all have one purse.'" So the verse that we're emphasizing is verse 12. It says, "Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, even whole as those who go down to the pit." So we're going to focus on that today. And to help us understand it, it's worth just mentioning what they mean by Sheol and the pit. So often you get these pairings in Proverbs and throughout Hebrew poetry, ancient Hebrew poetry. There's pairings, and they're meant to be kind of comparative statements or contrasting statements, as the case may be. And so this idea, swallow them alive like Sheol, is a comparative statement to even whole as those that go down to the pit. And Sheol and the pit were references to the grave. And so Sheol was the place of the dead, as it were, and the pit is the going into the place of the dead, into the grave. And so there's this idea of let us swallow them alive like death does, or like the grave does, or whatever. Let us even whole, the whole person, just like those that are buried, that are buried into death. And so these people are calling to us and saying, "Come with us. Let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent. Let us swallow the innocent like the grave would swallow them whole, just like death takes all of the person. Let us take all of the person, take everything." It's a pretty awful thing, really. It's quite awful. And so the proverb is being written to us to say, don't go with these people. Don't follow these people who entice us to do evil, to go down that road and that path. And I guess part of the emphasis here is that you can see the escalation in the sentences, right? "Come with us. Let us lie in wait for blood." So let's become violent and murderous. Let's ambush the innocent. So it's an increase, right? Let's not just murder somebody or kill them, but let's actually ambush somebody so that they have no chance to fight back. Let's do it to the innocent. And so you see this escalation, right? And then let's swallow them whole. Like, let's just take everything from them, not just a piece of them, but their whole self. And so just this intensification of the evil. And it's interesting how this is the destiny of evil. This is what happens when you take that path. So yesterday we were talking about the two paths, right? You can choose a path of righteousness or a path of evil in your life. You're going to have many opportunities to decide which path you want to walk. And this is the destiny of the path of evil. When we decide to embrace or start walking down the path of evil, it's an escalating path. It doesn't stay level. It gets worse and worse, right? You start off with violence, you move to murder against the innocent, you move to let's just take everything. right? Let's just swallow them whole. There's a totality to it that it just brings us to this desperate, dreadful place of being utterly evil. That's where the path leads. And so starting down the path is really, really dangerous, because that's where it goes. We can look at this in not just with murderous attitude, but with all evil. And we can kind of observe this in human history, how human corruption is I think it's fairly obvious. You look down through the pages of history, you'll just see it all over the place and all over the world. There's no part of the world that's immune to this. It's not like there's some country somewheres or some regime somewheres that is pure and spotless. Like, corruption just seems to be there, right? And it gets worse and worse when it's not dealt with. It becomes a path that leads to a worse and worse place, and it always does throughout all history. And I think that's important to realize, because I think we tend to think sometimes individually. We think sometimes that I'll never get that far. I'll never go to that end. I'm only going to take this path a little ways, but I would never go that far. We kind of make ourselves out to be angels or saints, and we think we're so infallible that we even, I may have some flaws, but I would never go so far as. But no one ever wakes up in the morning thinking, I'm going to be a murderer. That's not the way it works. And well, at least not for the vast majority of people, maybe a few very extreme cases. But for most people that end up there, they didn't start out there. They started out on a much simpler step. And it's a path that leads, once you take the first step on that path, and the second step's not so hard to take. And then once you've taken the second step, it's not so hard to take the third. And before you know it, you've gone all the way down the path, and you're in that place of, let's just swallow them whole. Let's just take it all. And that's pretty awful. We all start that far, in a sense. We all humans, we kind of start there. When you're a little tiny infant, you don't start out with a huge amount of benevolence. You start out with a kind of a selfish attitude. Naturally, you want to be taken care of, and you don't know anything else. And then your parents teach you kindness, and they teach you empathy, and they teach you those things as you grow older. And so, in some respects, in one way of thinking, we all kind of start that far, and we need to learn to take the path of good and walk down that path as we grow older. Children can be very cruel, right? And they have to learn from their parents and adults to take good paths and make good choices, not just be a child that bites or a child that hits, and that would go down a bad path. And so we learn that, and then as adults we kind of forget it. We think that, I'm not vulnerable. Well, you are. We all could go to very terrible places if we start down the path of evil. So here's the 4 questions for today's study, and you can deal with these. I'll give you my thoughts, but you can deal with these in your own devotions. But my first question is, why is this a thing? Why do humans come to this place where they like to feed on each other? They'll take from each other and harm each other and steal or plunder, or why does that happen? And why doesn't the kindness just take over, and we just be kind to people, and instead of taking, giving? And I think that what we need to understand is it's like I've been saying, it's this path thing, is that once we decide in our minds that something is pleasurable, right? It's nice to gain, it's nice to take, it's nice to get, and we decide to walk down that path, and then we're always going to up the bar, right? It becomes actually an enjoyable thing. There's a satisfaction in it, just like we're going to see in tomorrow's devotion. There's a plunder to it, like, oh, we'll gain from this. And you kind of teach yourself that there's something good I'm getting out of this bad thing. And so then you decide to go further, and it becomes pleasurable. Of course, in the end, it's not very pleasurable. You end up being very corrupt. But there's a process there. And so humans, it may start out as like a simple thing, but then it becomes an end in itself. The evil itself becomes an end in itself that people like. And so it's like an appetite that grows, and then there's a pleasure in just doing the bad thing. And that's a really messed up place to get to, but it can happen, right? Question 2, why do humans get to that point where they want to take everything? Like, why can't people be satisfied with just getting some? Let's swallow them whole. Let's consume them like the pit does. And why does that happen to people? And the reason that is because appetites never get satisfied, right? Right? Not really. Like you think about an appetite that you feed, and you think, if I feed this appetite, it'll be satisfied, but it doesn't really. I mean, you're satisfied for the moment. If you're hungry and you eat, you'll get satisfied. But the pleasure of satisfying that hunger actually causes the pursuit of the hunger, right? Like there's a natural hunger we have, but gluttony occurs because I really liked how it felt to satisfy that urge. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but there's something that starts to happen in our minds where, as we feed certain appetites, having the hunger actually becomes pleasurable, right? So you may have heard it said in a more sophisticated way, like anticipation is a pleasure in itself, right? Well, the hunger itself becomes pleasurable, and people get to this point where they're never satisfied with whatever it is, whether it be gluttony, or whether it be lust, or whether it be greed, or whether it be anger and hate, or whatever it is. And you start down those roads and you feed that appetite, it only grows, and you never ever get satisfied with the level you're at. You'll always be looking for the higher satisfaction, so you'll want more until let's just take it all. And that's how that path works. Question 3 for today: why would anyone ever gain an appetite in the first place for these things? Like, why would people ever make this decision? And I guess that's a good question. Why would we ever start on that road? But it's like I said earlier, it's not that you start at the end. You start on the road. You make the decision that this little bit of feeding this bad appetite is okay. I can be a little bit gluttonous. I can be a little bit lazy. I can be a little bit greedy. I can be a little bit lustful. And you think just a little bit's okay. And you don't realize that you're actually starting an appetite for that thing. And as you feed that little bit, you're creating an appetite for more. So that's how it happens. No one starts out saying, I'd like to be addicted to something. No one starts there, right? But you start out saying, I'd like the benefit of the thing. And it's not right, it's wrong to do this, but it'll be okay. And you start the appetite, and then the appetite grows, and you find yourself on a bad path. Our final question for today was, what's the antidote to all this? And like the old saying goes, what do they say? It's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, I guess that's kind of true, right? Like, don't get started in the first place. It's probably the best antidote. Don't ever choose to go down that road, even a little bit, the road of bad things. Don't even start the first footstep. It's the best antidote. But if you do find yourself on that path and you realize, I've wandered off into stuff that's not wise, it's not moral, then turn around. If you keep feeding that appetite, it's going to get harder to turn around in the future. You'll get to a point where you really can't. But if you are able to recognize it, turn around, decide to move back. Now, it's hard, depending how far down that path you've walked. It's hard to turn around, but you can still do it. So turn around, do the hard work, because it'll only get harder later. If you don't, then you're just going to go deeper and deeper, and it'll only get harder and harder to turn around. Every step you take down the wrong path is a step you got to take coming back. And so, it just makes logical sense. Or the farther you go, the farther back you got to come. And so just choose and say, you know what, right now, before it's too late for me, I've chosen a bad path. Let me just get myself turned around now and head to that right path. And don't keep developing the appetite. Resist the appetite and turn. And I guess that's why Jesus said, deny yourself, like take up your cross, the sacrifice of yourself, and follow Jesus. And you can come away from an evil choice. And then Jesus famously said, those that hunger and thirst for righteousness, you'll be filled. So start to develop a righteous hunger for righteousness and feed that appetite. And you'll find that you're satisfied with your life as a result. And yes, you'll still always have a hunger for righteousness, but you'll be satisfied. So anyway, that's the devotional for today. Hope it's useful. Tomorrow we'll go on to the next verse. And so I'll see you then, but I'm just going to close in prayer. So God bless your day and make good choices. And if you see your own bad choice, turn around. God, I pray that you would teach us an appetite for good and an appetite for righteousness, and not to be drawn to the appetite for evil. I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a great day.